G'day everybody, Dean Sweetman here along with Frank Barry. Good to see everyone today. What's going on, Frank?
Oh man, it's good to be here after a nice little one-day trip to Austin yesterday and jumping back to San Diego.
We had the best brisket I've ever had in my life.
Oh, the barbecue was amazing.
Butter.
It was a good
Slid
trip.
through. It was a good trip. So good. Well, it's good to go. It's good to come back. Hey, we've got a fantastic guest today who has got a phenomenal name, right? Like, yes. I just want to say it in Scottish, and because it's so awesome.
It's gonna be. But
we've got
show.
this laddie called Brett McCracken, and he's got a book out, and we're gonna have a whole bunch of fun with him today.
Yep. Hey, Brett, how's it going, man?
Hey guys, I'm doing well. How are you?
It's great to have you with us. So yeah, Brett McCracken. You've been around the publishing industry for quite some time. It sounds like.
Yeah, that's been my kind of career, my thing. I got my start with Relevant magazine. If you're familiar with Relevant. Yeah. And they were getting started in the early 2000s. I was in college and they needed content and writing, so they were happy to publish my stuff. And then I wrote for Christianity Today for a number of years, and then I'm with the Gospel Coalition right now.
Yeah. So you're the senior editor there, and it sounds like in talking a little bit before the show, you also do some movie reviews and other things like that for the Gospel Coalition. So tell us, give us 30 seconds about your role there.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with the Gospel Coalition, we're a website, so we're online only, but we have articles and podcasts and video content. We do conferences and events as well. And it's just kind of applying the gospel to all areas of life. So we're, not only ministry, but just everything, parenting, and the arts and culture and movies. So that's kind of my area. So I oversee our content on movies, music, TV, technology, cultural trends, that sort of thing. So it's fun. It's a really lively topic to be writing about. I get to review movies and see kind of what is trending in the cultural imagination and how that intersects with the gospel and Christian themes. So yeah, that's kind of what I do.
Yeah, very cool. And in your spare time, you just had a kid and wrote another book. So, you're all over the place.
Yeah, I had two babies, like one actual baby and then a birth. So,
yeah.
The process is similar.
Yeah. And great book title. I guess we don't need to get into your kids' names just yet. But the title of the book is Uncomfortable. And, we're going to unpack a little bit of that today. So it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, the awkward and essential challenge of Christian community is the subtitle. So,
nice.
Yeah. The discomfort of church, basically.
Right.
So, diving right in the book, you challenge readers to give up on the idea of their dream church and accept that life in a local church can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So tell us what you mean by that.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we approach church as consumers because we live in a consumeristic society and we approach everything that way. So you have people who come to church expecting, like anything in a consumer society, it should just fit me. It should fit me in my checklist of items that I want. Like, this is the type of music I want. This is the type of children's ministry I want. I'd like this type of coffee, if possible, like everything. And so I'm really just challenging that idea and saying, like, church is actually a beautiful escape from the consumer mentality. It's a place we can go to not be the center of the universe, where the church doesn't revolve around you and your preferences. And it's actually for your health and for your good, I think, to sometimes push yourself into discomfort and push yourself into communities, especially where not everyone is your ideal person to be around. And some people might be awkward and uncomfortable. And the church, I think, can be a beautiful sort of discomfort because it's this motley crew of people from all walks of life, every ethnicity, cultural background, socioeconomic status. It just runs the gamut. And that's kind of always been what's beautiful about the Christian church. And yet I think we often, in American church context, we often don't lean into that as much as we can. And sometimes we build our churches around like-minded, similar people, so that they're just kind of homogenous communities. You have kind of the hipster church where hipsters go and feel comfortable because they're around everyone that's just like them. And you have the middle class kind of suburban soccer mom churches where you go and just everyone is just like you. And so that's our tendency, and that's our default in a consumeristic society, is just kind of choosing what's like me and what's kind of just going to affirm me where I'm at. And I don't think that's a healthy way to live. And spiritually, especially, I think it's to our detriment to choose the path of least resistance and the path of comfort.
Great point.
Yeah, totally. I mean, but it's sort of countercultural, right? Which a lot of things about Christianity are and following Jesus, but in a lot of ways, most people are seeking comfort. They're seeking, peace and kind of things being easy and nice and the way that they like them, and sort of falling into our like we're creatures of habit, right? Like we seek that in a lot of ways. So what would you tell the Christian who is sort of seeking a comfortable church?
Yeah, I will. Do you want to grow? Like, is that ultimately the goal here? I think it should be with a church. Like, that is, I think, ultimately what the church is for, to grow people in their discipleship, to become more like Jesus. And the thing about growth is you don't grow in comfort. Like, more often than not, you don't grow in your comfort zone. So think about like a sport or an athletic skill you're trying to develop. Like, you're not going to grow just kind of by sitting on the couch in your comfort zone. Like, you're going to grow by pushing yourself, and it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be comfortable, but that's the only way you're going to train those muscles and develop those skills. So it's just across the board in life. I think the reality is we grow not in comfort, but in kind of discomfort, in areas where there's friction, where we feel growth happens. So to the Christian who is kind of choosing the comfortable way, the comfortable church, I would just challenge them a little bit and say, like, do you really think you're going to grow the most in a context where, there's never an idea that you disagree with? There's never a person who rubs you the wrong way. There's never anything that just makes you uncomfortable. I don't think so. I actually, in my own experience, in various seasons in my Christian life, and I've grown up as a Christian, it's been a part of my story since I was a kid. There have been seasons where I would say I chose that more comfortable church, and I just kind of picked the church that fit me in whatever season that was in. And it was great. It was, it's fun, but I wouldn't say I grew. I wouldn't say that I moved the needle in my spiritual life. Whereas the last couple of years, and kind of the impetus for me writing this book, Uncomfortable, comes out of my own church experience in recent years of choosing a church here in Southern California that actually is very different from what I would say is my dream church or my perfect church. It's actually a very uncomfortable church for me, and I talk about various reasons why in the book. But I have found that I've grown more in the last 5 years being a part of this church than almost any other church experience I've had. And it hasn't been easy. And there's been moments where the consumer in me wants to just like throw in the towel and leave and just go to like the church down the street that has the music that I like better, But I've stuck with it, and I found that has been really fruitful for my spiritual life. So I wanted to just challenge other Christians to take that kind of just less comfortable approach to church.
Right. One thing that I find just on that topic, I have kids, they're 7. I've got triplet boys right now. And we're in this stage of like, they're getting into sports, and they're in first grade, and there's all these things, right? So we're constantly putting them in situations that are probably very uncomfortable for them, right? Because they're kids, and we want them to experience and grow and learn, and everything's uncomfortable because it's all new, right? So with our kids, we'll put them in uncomfortable situations in healthy ways, right? Like, I'm not talking about like bad stuff, but
Right.
We do that because we know they need it and they need to grow. But then as adults, we revert to comfortability and peacefulness and these kind of things. So it's kind of funny, right? We get it for our kids, but then as adults, it's easier to revert back.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and we live stressful lives and we live in a busy, chaotic age. So it's understandable why people wouldn't like choose like uncomfortable church, right? Like it's one day a week maybe where you cannot be stressed out, like you know, you're not at your job, like you're not shuffling the kids around to soccer practice on Sundays. So it's understandable why people would opt for the kind of comfortable church, but I think our spirituality is one of the most important areas of our life to challenge ourselves, to grow and stretch ourselves, and not take the path of least resistance.
Hey, Brett, we deal with a lot of pastors around the offering moment that, and that can be extremely uncomfortable, not just for pastors delivering it, but for parishioners, members receiving it.
Right.
I'm interested in the research. Did you come up against that and have any kind of thoughts around that, the whole generosity moment inside a church?
Yeah, when I was writing the book, I kind of polled a bunch of pastors that I knew and asked them, like, what are the most uncomfortable things that you find in your church, the areas of friction with people? And a couple people mentioned tithing. It actually wasn't as often mentioned as I thought it would be, because that is one of the things I think you think about when you think about uncomfortable topics.
Right. Yeah.
But there definitely were a few pastors who like mentioned, tithing. And interestingly, like most of them were in like Orange County, like California. That was like a big issue here. So that's interesting. I don't know if there's regional differences in terms of parts of the world.
I think it's everywhere, but
yeah,
if you have a big conglomerate of Christians and churches and people move from church to church, there's a lot of offended, air quotes, people, and so then churches start getting super sensitive to it,
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I think the fact is, and people can choose from in the marketplace, if you will. And I hate referring to churches in marketplace language, but if the marketplace is flooded, and it is with churches, then you have pastors who worry about like every little thing that they say that might turn someone off means that a person's likely to just leave and go to one of 30 other options nearby in terms of church. And so that's one of the big downsides about having too many choices in a consumer society where people really do think in terms of being a consumer. There, people have that mindset of like, hey, if there's something about this church that starts bothering me, doesn't kind of fit me perfectly, I'm going to go try another one. Just like,
it's like have it your way, right? It's fast food, go for the one that you like.
Have one toothpaste and all of a sudden you kind of start getting sick of it. There's like all these other brands of toothpaste you could try. And so it's just problematic, I think, that the church has become just one of many consumer items that people approach, just like any other consumer item. And so I'm really trying to challenge that mentality in the book, both to pastors. I'm trying to push pastors to not kind of fall into that and perpetuate that mentality of being overly sensitive to the consumer's needs and trying to meet everyone where they're at and please everyone. But also, of course, the book is challenging people, the churchgoers, and really trying to get them out of that mindset that church is just something you go to get.
Right.
The church is there to serve me. That's just not what Jesus wanted his church to be about, right? He wanted people to serve, not be served.
You think about the early church. You talk about like church shopping and church. Like there was only one church in every city,
right?
And if you didn't like it, there was nowhere else to go,
right?
Yeah. I sometimes I wish we could go back to that. It probably wouldn't. There'd be other things about that era that we wouldn't want, but
right.
I do think that there's just bad things that happen when there's so many choices, and it becomes easy for people to get complacent. Like if you're a Christian in some part of the Middle East where there's like literally one option of a church and it's the only safe place Christians can gather, you're not going to be picky about the music and the coffee. Yeah. But here in Orange County, California, you can be picky about all that because there's a church for every flavor, you know, whatever you might be interested in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like, you know, just referencing the early church, right, over in Acts 2, when you're like, man, they met together all the time and they broke bread and they prayed, and like you read that in the spirit of that scripture and you're like, that's how it started, right? And that's what we all want to have in our own local churches, is that kind of community, that kind of spirit, which is not selfish, it's not comfortable, it's not self-seeking, right? It's the opposite of all those things.
There was a beautiful sense of communal identity where it was about the whole, and it was about serving the whole and not serving the self, and not looking at it mainly in terms of how is it serving me and my needs. Yeah.
You mentioned in the book also addressing sort of the not just the church leader, but the church goer, the Christian, right? And what kind of uncomfortable things did you uncover related to Christians and managing their own money, right? So like being a Christian and knowing that should have an impact on my financial life as well. That shouldn't be excluded. But you know, where does that get uncomfortable for people?
Yeah, I mean, I think the same mentality that makes people kind of hesitant to submit to any authority outside of the self on anything. Like they don't want a pastor to tell them something that calls them out on anything. Like it's kind of, that same mentality makes people really uncomfortable when there starts to be talk about your money, right? Because it's my money. Like this is my money. I get to decide what I do with it. Like, how dare anyone else speak into that? This is a very private thing. So it kind of is the same mentality that leads you to kind of approach church as, well, ultimately it's about me and kind of how it serves me and meets me where I'm at and helps me accomplish whatever goals I want spiritually. That same mentality makes us, I think, really hesitant with money to like, hold on, you can't like take this from me. Like, maybe I'll give it if I feel like, you know, inspired at some point to give back to the church. But the minute you start being challenged to do that, and like that is actually voiced out loud in the church, I think people get really uncomfortable because it goes against the grain of everything in our consumer society, which does kind of say like you own, what you've earned is yours to do with whatever you want. And the world is your oyster. Like, you can buy what you want to buy. You can go on Amazon and choose to spend your money however you want.
Yeah.
No one can tell you how to spend your money or not to spend your money. And so that ultimately, I think it comes down to like a real friction with kind of individualism and communal identity. So I think as Westerners, as individualistic, we just really don't like the idea that like our decisions on anything, whether it's sexuality or our vocational path or what we do with our money, that there's any sort of that should be open to other people speaking into that. But the church is fundamentally a communal identity. It's a family. We're meant to speak into each other's lives on those important topics. And yet I think there's just a lot of friction there in our culture because we don't like other people to speak into those private areas that we think should be private. So, yeah.
Hey, Brett, do you think, like in reverse, that, you know, flipping it over, is that why pastors feel uncomfortable about talking about money? Because you got people in the pews of all different, you know, shapes and sizes, depending on the church. If there's this, you know, kind of almost a baseline of, man, this is mine, I worked hard for it, you know, kind of mentality. And, you know, the current hipster culture, the younger culture, millennial culture, the digital culture, I see studies across. I see they're super generous and they're super not generous. But all that's going to play into the pastor's mind on how to actually talk about, you know, giving in the church context.
Yeah, so I think the pastor feels very, very aware of that. Like all the things we've already talked about, the whole, the fear of anyone being the least bit put off on any topic is going to leave. So I think there's that practical fear of losing members. I think there's a sense that pastors have that, people live in a culture where they're being bombarded from every direction of things being sold at them. Like millennials and, Generation Z especially have grown up just surrounded by advertisements and people asking them for money and to spend their money. Yeah. So I think there's a real hesitancy to make the church seem like just another entity that's trying to sell something or trying to get your money. And that's a real problem. I think that's a bigger issue of the church just feeling like it's just one of many kind of.
So how can churches? So how can churches differentiate? So obviously, like we're not like Amazon. We're not like we just come and buy stuff. It's not transactional in that sense. Right. It's like you're part of this, God-ordained community on the earth to preach the gospel and expand the message and grow the kingdom. Yeah. How do you flip that? Because it's not the same.
It's not the same, and that's I think a really hard question, but it's one that we need to figure out. Like, how do we position ourselves in a way that we're not just another consumer commodity? We're not just another voice in the chaotic chorus of voices coming at people. We are a qualitatively just different thing, like different. So I think one way is just to challenge the consumer idea and just say like, hey, we aren't here to we don't exist just to kind of be for you what everything else in your world is. Like, we're not just another app on your phone that exists to make your life easier. We're not just another product on Amazon that you can kind of pick because it meets you where you're at and accomplishes something. We are an eternal entity that has been around way before you and will outlive you. And it's not about you, but you are invited into this story of what God is doing on mission in the church. And it's a privilege for you to be here, to be involved in this. And tithing is a real practical way that you can invest in this eternal mission, this story that has been going on for centuries and will persist after you're gone. Yeah. So I think broadening the horizon and really framing it not as just a consumer transaction for the here and now, for your life, but this is about investing in something bigger than yourself, for a mission that is just way greater and more than any sort of what this does for me type of question. Yeah.
I mean,
it's a challenge.
Yeah. And it's like, people need to understand that, like, we're not here for the church to serve us. Like, we are the church, right? Like, and of course the church serves us because you have great friends and families and all these things that are here taking care of us. But you get like, like the Bible teaches, like, you get what you give out, right? Like, you're going to get back more when you're a giving, serving, loving person. It just comes back, right? So when people start to understand that, it flips the whole thing around. You're like, no, I want to like invest in my local church because that's what God calls us to do. And it pays 100-fold, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that I suspect with the younger generation is because we live in this like hyper present focused moment culturally where everything is about the now, right? Instagram is called Instagram for a reason. It's about the instant. So we live in this very just kind of breathlessly like exhausting moment where it's just changes rapidly. Nothing is fixed. Everything is transient and disposable. And my suspicion is that generation want this bigger picture. They want to be part of something that transcends that kind of transience. They want something transcendent. And so inviting them into the church and really portraying a big vision of the church that is older, is much bigger than your context wherever you are. Like, and giving them that vision and kind of asking them to buy into it literally for the sake of something far greater and bigger and older. To me, that is a message that will resonate as our society just becomes increasingly claustrophobic, because everything is about what's happening now in my life and what's serving me as a consumer right now. Like, what can I watch on Netflix right now? What can I on? And everything is going to be forgotten tomorrow. And there's no sense of history. We're not connected with the past. And I think that's just driving people crazy. I think we're going insane as a society because we're so unrooted and we're so disconnected. And tithing and investing in the bigger picture of the church is a great pushback against that, I think.
It's so counter, intuitive to how people think, just automatically with money, right? It's like, man, this is mine. Mm-hmm. And then for Jesus to come along to come and say, hey, it's I want your whole life. You want to follow me?
Right.
So it's not about the 10%. No, it's about 100% now in the New Testament. So you better get used to this giving away of your life thing, because that's the constant, and as you mature in your walk with Jesus, it every day there's this sense of, man, I don't own anything.
Yeah.
In the context of the early church, when they piled all their stuff and bought it and helped the needy.
Sold their property, right?
Right.
Right.
We have a different context now. We're in a Western environment, 2,000 years on, but still the spirit of that, of you know what, there's people in need around me, and I got to get out of my own self and be part of something that's missional. You said that word a few times, and the mission is I got to keep expanding this message, and that message is good. The Gospel Coalition that you work for, that's the good news, right? And so that's the journey of getting maybe younger Christians who are a little younger, thinking more and more like, with a biblical perspective on what they're supposed to be doing in the here and now.
Yeah. What, Brett, so circling it back, and even with Dean's kind of hitting on some of it, we circle it back to the church leader, the pastor. How do they start to overcome some of this? Or what did you describe in the book or in your conversations with pastors and church leaders? How do they sort of overcome them being uncomfortable and challenging the church in appropriate ways based on the scriptures? What do they do? What works?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no one kind of silver bullet way to solve this problem, but I think it's just the accumulation of small choices where you don't plan your services out with kind of this self-conscious awareness of if we do this song, that crowd is not going to like it. Or if we preach about this topic, those people aren't going to like it.
Right.
Start from a place of what is biblical, what are we called to do, and what's going to be for the good of our sheep. As shepherds of the church, how are we going to grow our sheep? Whether or not they like it shouldn't be the primary question. If that's our primary question, then we're just perpetuating the consumer Christianity. So I really think just that mentality is where you should start as a pastor, to shift your mentality to be okay with challenging and stretching and making church a little bit more uncomfortable for people, and maybe talk about why that's a good thing, off the pulpit. Talk about this value of we grow more when we're stretched. And so as our church, as this community, let's commit ourselves to lean into that. And let's come to worship, just to use one example of music, which tends to be a very controversial flashpoint when it comes to why people choose or not
style.
Music style. So I would just challenge pastors to speak to their congregations about look, I know, this music might not be everyone's cup of tea, and you might actually hate the music style here, but don't just endure it, and don't stand there with your arms, at your chest, just kind of
folded.
This is worship is an opportunity to get outside of yourself and to just make it about God, not about you. So whether or not it's your preference, whether or not it's your perfect style, sing anyway, give yourself to it anyway, and that will be so freeing for you. And it'll make for such a healthier church when we're all just kind of fully there, present in worship, even if we know that some people like it more than others, the style of music. And that's, for me, that was a big thing at my church that I go to now that was very uncomfortable for me. Like the music style, not at all like what I would choose. Like I'm more of a traditional, like hymns. Like I love organ, I'm kind of an old soul when it comes to music, I guess. But my very like rock, like guitars, wall of sound, just, you have to have earplugs. Some people like literally have earplugs.
I have earplugs when I go to my church too.
Okay, well, maybe I should do that and not feel like that's, yeah.
No, mine are bright yellow.
Oh,
put them in, yeah. And my son's the pastor, so, he puts me out the front in front of the speaker. I'm like, dude, I'm dying here.
Yes, exactly. Like I have to sit in the front at my,
it's all good.
It's just very loud. But all that to say, like,
forget earplugs, just go with the full headset. Just put on like the jet headset, like if you were on the run tarmac.
Right. Yeah, that wouldn't send a message to the person there at all.
Oh man, but good stuff, man.
Yeah, for me, that has been it's been a freeing thing to like approach worship as like, look, it's not my favorite style, but man, I love the chance that I have every Sunday to just worship God. 100 people from every walk of life who I would never like be in the same room with in any other circumstance. And just to look around and see, okay, there's this crazy cross section of people who have nothing else in common except that we're worshiping God and we're just pouring ourselves out. And that's the beauty of church, when it's not about you, it's not about your preferences, it's about this thing that's happening collectively where the Holy Spirit is present and we're oriented around God and not ourselves. And so that's ultimately what Uncomfortable is about, is our willingness to endure discomfort for the sake of something bigger than our own comfort.
Love it, man.
Love it.
So where can people get the book?
Amazon. I know we've been talking about Amazon derogatively, but Amazon's a good place. So speaking of consumerism, you could go to Amazon. But yeah, it was published by Crossway. So you could go to Crossway's website, or any online bookstore would have it. So yeah.
Search
All right,
Uncomfortable.
Frank, wrap it up.
Well, I was just going to say, search Uncomfortable, Brett McCracken, and the book will show up in Google too, and you'll find your favorite place to buy it, I'm sure. So, Brett, it was great to have you today, man. Thanks for coming on, sharing some of your wisdom, your insight, what you've been learning yourself personally. It's all really good stuff. And, hopefully church leaders watching this will be inspired, to not be fearful about talking about the uncomfortable stuff. And I think ultimately, your point, Brett, about like, you just have to have conviction about what the Bible says and be confident in talking about it. So love that. So Brett, great to have you, man. We'll get this show up soon, and we'll catch you another time.
Good to meet you, Brett.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
That was good stuff. And we got a great show next week. I'm pumped. All the shows are awesome, but next week we've got Clayton and Ashley Hurst. They're pastors at Lakewood Church, and we're going to talk about sort of marriage and family and money. It's going to be awesome.
That's going to be great. I know those guys, and what a great church, and they'll have a bunch of wisdom. So great show today. Always fantastic seeing you, mate. And if you're listening or viewing, hope you're enjoying the podcast and the TV side of things. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We'll see you next time.
Next week. Give us a like, share us on Facebook. Love you guys. See you, Tidely fam.
Thanks. Love you guys. See ya.